December 25th, 1991.
Military units, Soviet hardliners who ousted
Последствия могут оказаться
trolleys that have been set up on stand at a full brutality.
For nearly 70 years, it had stood as one of the most powerful nations on Earth, a superpower feared by its enemies, admired by its allies, and capable of destroying the world several times over. Yet on this cold winter evening, something unimaginable was about to happen. Millions watched their televisions in silence. Soldiers waited for orders that would never come. Politicians stared at a map that was changing before their eyes. And above the Kremlin, a flag was coming down, not after a war, not after a foreign invasion, not after a revolution, but because the system itself was collapsing from within. The Soviet Union, one of history's greatest empires, was dying.
And before the night was over, it would cease to exist. The end of a superpower. The collapse of the Soviet Union.
To understand how the Soviet Union collapsed, we must first understand how it was built. The story begins in 1917. The Russian Empire was falling apart. World War I had devastated the country. Millions were dead. Food shortages crippled cities. The economy was in ruins. And the centuries-old Romanov dynasty was losing control. When revolution finally erupted, it changed history forever. Led by Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks, the old empire was overthrown. In its place emerged a radical new vision, a state built on communist ideals, a society where workers, not kings, would rule. At least that was the promise. The years that followed were brutal. Civil war consumed the former empire. Entire regions were devastated. Millions died from fighting, famine, and disease. Yet despite the chaos, the Bolsheviks survived. By 1922, they officially formed a new nation.
The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR. At first, few outside observers believed it would last. Many expected the communist experiment to fail. Instead, it grew stronger, much stronger. Under Joseph Stalin, the Soviet Union transformed itself at breathtaking speed. Factories rose from empty fields. Railroads crossed vast distances. Entire cities appeared where nothing had existed before. The cost was enormous. Forced collectivization, political repression, labor camps. Millions suffered, but by the late 1930s, the Soviet Union had become one of the world's largest industrial powers. And this was only the beginning. Then came the greatest test in Soviet history, World War II. In June 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion ever attempted. More than 3 million German soldiers crossed Soviet borders. Entire cities were destroyed. Millions of civilians fled east. For a moment, it appeared the Soviet Union might be annihilated, but it survived. Then it fought back. The battles of Moscow, Stalingrad, Kursk. One by one, the German advance was halted, then reversed. The war cost the Soviet Union an estimated 27 million lives, a number almost impossible to comprehend. Yet when the fighting ended in 1945, the USSR emerged stronger than ever. Its army stood in the heart of Europe. Its influence stretched across an entire continent, and a new world order was taking shape. Communist governments appeared throughout Eastern Europe, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, East Germany. Together, they formed a protective buffer around the Soviet Union, but they also expanded Soviet power far beyond Russia's borders. By the late 1940s, a new conflict had begun, the Cold War. On one side stood the United States. On the other stood the Soviet Union. Two superpowers, two ideologies, two competing visions for humanity's future. For nearly half a century, the world lived under the shadow of nuclear war. Yet despite the tension, Soviet influence continued to expand. Its military became one of the largest in history. Its intelligence agencies operated across the globe. Its scientists achieved extraordinary breakthroughs. And in 1957, the Soviet Union stunned the world. It launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. Humanity had entered the space age. The Soviet Union appeared unstoppable. By the 1960s and 1970s, the Soviet Union had reached the height of its power. Its territory stretched across 11 time zones. Its population exceeded 280 million people. Its military rivaled that of the United States, and its influence reached every corner of the globe. From Eastern Europe to Africa, from Latin America to Asia, the Soviet Union supported governments, funded revolutionary movements, and competed with the West for influence on nearly every continent. To many around the world, communism appeared to be advancing. The future seemed uncertain. Would the Soviet system eventually surpass capitalism? Would Moscow become the center of a new global order? For a time, many believed it could. The Soviet Union achieved remarkable successes. Education expanded dramatically. Literacy rates soared. Scientific research flourished. Its engineers built massive dams, power stations and industrial complexes. Its space program continued to break barriers. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human being to leave Earth. He orbited the planet in 108 minutes and returned safely home, a triumph that echoed around the world. For millions of Soviet citizens, these achievements were sources of immense pride. The USSR had transformed itself from a largely agricultural nation into a technological and military giant. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. The Soviet economy was built on central planning. Government officials determined what factories produced, how much was manufactured, and where resources were allocated. For decades, this system had delivered impressive growth, but over time, it became increasingly inefficient. Innovation slowed, productivity stagnated, and shortages became a part of everyday life. Store shelves often sat half empty. Citizens waited in long lines for basic goods. Simple items that were common in the West could be difficult to obtain. Yet criticism of the system remained dangerous. The government controlled the media, political opposition was suppressed, and public dissatisfaction was rarely allowed to surface openly. From the outside, the Soviet Union still looked powerful, but inside, the foundations were weakening. Then came a crisis that would expose those weaknesses to the entire world. In December 1979, Soviet forces entered Afghanistan. The mission was expected to be quick. Military planners believed they could stabilize the country and secure a friendly government. Instead, they walked into a nightmare. The war dragged on year after year. Soviet troops fought a determined insurgency in some of the harshest terrain on Earth. Casualties mounted, costs soared, and public confidence began to erode. For many historians, Afghanistan became the Soviet Union's Vietnam, a conflict that drained resources, damaged morale, and exposed military limitations. But the war was only one problem among many. Back home, economic troubles were becoming impossible to ignore. Growth slowed dramatically. Factories often met production quotas by sacrificing quality. Corruption spread through government institutions. The gap between official propaganda and everyday reality grew wider. People could see the difference, and increasingly they were asking questions. Why was a superpower struggling to provide basic consumer goods? Why was a nation capable of launching spacecraft unable to supply enough everyday products? The answers were complicated, but the result was simple. Faith in the system was fading. Then, in 1985, a new leader emerged, Mikhail Gorbachev. He was younger than previous Soviet leaders, more energetic, more open to change, and he understood that the country faced serious problems. Gorbachev believed reform could save the Soviet Union, so he launched two major initiatives: perestroika, restructuring, and glasnost, openness. The goal was not to destroy communism, it was to modernize it, to make it work. For the first time in decades, citizens could speak more freely. Journalists gained greater freedom. Government failures were openly discussed. Political prisoners were released. Information that had long been hidden became public, but reform produced unintended consequences. The more people learned about the system's failures, the more they questioned its legitimacy. The more freedom they received, the more freedom they demanded. Across Eastern Europe, change was spreading rapidly. Communist governments that had once appeared permanent suddenly looked fragile. Then, in November 1989, one event shocked the world. The Berlin Wall fell. For nearly 3 decades, it had symbolized the division between East and West. Now it was coming apart piece by piece. And with it, the Soviet Empire in Eastern Europe began to unravel. The world was changing faster than anyone expected, including the leaders in Moscow. By 1990, the crisis had entered a new phase. The Soviet Union was no longer facing challenges only from abroad. It was facing them from within. Across the republics, nationalist movements gained momentum. Lithuania demanded independence. Then others followed: Estonia, Latvia, Georgia, Ukraine. Citizens who had once lived under a single flag were beginning to imagine a different future, a future outside the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, the economy continued to deteriorate. Shortages worsened. Political divisions deepened. Confidence in the government collapsed. Then came the summer of 1991, and the final act of the Soviet drama. In August, hardline communist officials launched a coup. They feared Gorbachev's reforms had gone too far. They wanted to preserve the old system. Tanks rolled into Moscow. Troops occupied key locations, and for a moment it appeared the coup might succeed. But events took an unexpected turn. A rising political figure stepped into the spotlight. Boris Yeltsin, standing atop a tank outside the Russian parliament building, Yeltsin called on citizens to resist. The image became iconic. Crowds gathered. The military hesitated. And within days, the coup collapsed. Its failure destroyed what remained of the Communist Party's authority. The Soviet Union had survived wars, famines, purges, and foreign threats. But it could not survive the loss of belief in its own system. One republic after another declared independence. The Union was disintegrating, and there was no way to stop it. On December 25, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev addressed the nation. His voice was calm, but the meaning was historic. He announced his resignation as president of the Soviet Union, a position that would cease to exist within hours. That evening, the red Soviet flag above the Kremlin was lowered. For the final time, in its place place rose the Russian tricolor. The Soviet Union was gone. Not conquered, not invaded, gone. After 69 years, one of the most powerful states in human history had disappeared. 15 independent nations emerged from its collapse, and the Cold War came to an end. The collapse of the Soviet Union remains one of the most extraordinary events of the modern age. A superpower that once challenged the United States, a nation that launched humanity into space, a state that shaped the lives of hundreds of millions, vanished without a world war. Its rise had transformed the 20th century. Its fall transformed it once again. Yet the story did not end in 1991. The consequences of that collapse continue to shape our world today, in the politics of Eastern Europe, in the security calculations of global powers, in the tensions between Russia and the West, and in the lessons governments study when confronting economic stagnation, political reform, and national identity. The Soviet Union is gone, but its legacy remains, a reminder that even the mightiest powers can fall, not only because of enemies beyond their borders, but because of forces growing quietly within. Empires often appear permanent, until suddenly,
They are not.
the end of a superpower, the collapse of the Soviet Union.